over the past week, we've been doing a lot of different mini lessons. We learned how to determine the theme of a piece of literature or a story. We also learned about focusing on author's craft in the story or a piece of literature in order to notice the way in which authors are developing ideas. We also talked about how it's important to focus on story elements like characters and setting and conflict when we're making an interpretation of a story, when we're deciding on a theme, okay, or on what a character is like. All right, so today is actually our opportunity to put all of those things together. We're going to actually begin to work on a new essay in which we're not focusing on a character from the book Fox, but we're going to be focusing on the theme and how the author developed the theme. Now, in your journal, these are the possible themes that we generated in our previous lesson. When we looked, remember the steps that we took, we made a list of the life issues that came up in the story. Then we asked ourselves, is the author saying something about this life issue? And we noticed that the author was saying something about friendship. The author was saying something about loss. And we generated, and this is just generic, you don't necessarily have to word your theme this way, but these are two possible themes. Remember also we talked about the fact that it's okay for a story or a piece of literature to have more than one theme. As a matter of fact, as we move into the intermediate grades, 4th and 5th, we're going to be encountering text that is complex enough that there are going to be more than one theme in the piece. Now, for our purposes, though, we want to make sure we only choose one of them. We want to only choose one of them. And since there is no wrong or right here, I would make a decision if I were you writing, if I was myself writing the essay, I would choose to write an essay in which the most text evidence was available. Just because I want to have plenty of choice in the evidence that I'm going to use in my essay. I don't want to have to really spend a lot of time trying to make sure that I really find and go searching for itty-bitty tiny bits of evidence. So I would definitely choose the one that you feel has the most evidence for it. Okay, so today we're actually going to start to plan our essay. And so I wanted to remind you, first of all, of two possible themes, because that's going to become your thesis statement. And then I also wanted to remind you of the things that you focus on. And I'll give you the opportunity to finish copying this in a minute, but I'm just going to shift it, okay? What you want to ask yourself is, how did the author, in our case, how did Margaret Wilde develop the theme? Because remember that we learned that authors make very specific choices in the types of characters that they have, in what they have their characters do, what they have them say, how they have them act and interact with others. Authors make particular choices in the setting of the story. Authors make particular choices in the kind of problem and how the problem is solved. And all of those things happen in order to develop a theme, in order to develop a message. The author's not just going to come right out and tell you what that message is. You're going to have to do the work of figuring it out. but they are going to give you clues that point you in the general direction. Okay? So, two things that we want to consider, as we said before, this is just a review because we did a whole lesson on craft. We did a whole lesson on story elements. This is just to review. And remember, you have charts in your reference packet that you can go back to look to see what these are. But in craft, when you're analyzing a piece of literature and you're looking for craft, you might be looking for the imagery. What images is the author creating for you? And imagery involves the 5 senses. So when you think about the 5 senses, which is seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, and feeling, you look specifically for those things. And then you ask yourself, well, how did the images that Margaret Wilde created, how did that develop the theme? So when you think perhaps of the fire and the desert and the differences in Magpie's Choice, okay, perhaps that might be something that you bring out. Metaphors, remember we said a metaphors and similes are comparing things. The one that stands out for me in Fox is that fox flickered like fire, right? That's a great simile. All right, you might ask yourself, how did Margaret Wilde use that to develop the theme? Repetition. We have that repetition. I will be your eye and you will be my wings, okay? That's said several times. That's because the author is trying to draw your attention to it. How did that repetition of those words help to develop the theme? Symbolism. Does anything in the story symbolize something else? Does it stand for something? All right? In many cases, there are symbols in there that we really have to certainly look for, okay? When we think about common symbols that we know already, things like a dove is a symbol for peace, okay? So we can also look for symbols in our story. Fire might be a symbol. Heat might be a symbol. But you have to figure out as the reader what that represents. Okay, so let's turn to look at story elements. Now, because we know that authors make deliberate choices, we know that everything was planned out in advance in order to develop that theme. So we want to look at the characters and the choice of characters. We had a conversation last week about choosing the choice of fox and how a fox is portrayed traditionally in stories and how choosing for that character to be a fox made us think in certain ways. The setting. We also had a talk very early on when we first started reading this story about how this is set, since the author is Australian, this seems to or appears to be set in the outback. Okay? Author didn't choose for these to be characters that are people, they're animals. They live out in the outback. So you have to ask yourself, why did the author choose to set that book here? And how does that help to develop the theme? The problem or the conflict. That is central to the story. And oftentimes the problem, either in how it rises or how it's solved, helps to develop the theme. So you want to think about the problem or the conflict in the story and how that brings out the theme. How does that deliver the message to you? And then also that solution to the problem or the resolution of the conflict. How do they end up dealing with that conflict? And then another one is always like a lesson learned. Many times in stories, one of the characters learns a lesson, and they may even say at the end of the story that if they had to do it all over again, they would do it differently, knowing what they know now, knowing what they learned. Okay, so as I said, today is the day we're going to start planning. And I want to remind you that your plan is going to have that thesis statement in the cloud at the top of the page. And then it's going to have your 3 main ideas. So let's go ahead. I know that some of you haven't finished copying this down yet. That's fine. I will give you the opportunity later. But I'd like you to go ahead and turn to a fresh page. And when you're writing your thesis statement, you're going to start by saying the theme, of Fox. And a lot of you guys forgot to do the proper punctuation. This gets underlined. And I'm going to put down a theme. You do not have to choose this theme. This is just what I'm going to put down as a model. You already have 2 themes that are possible themes on the other page. You can rewrite them in your own words if you want to, or if you need to, you can copy it down. The important thing here, boys and girls, is that your thesis statement for your literary essay should contain the title of the work and the author. It should be written in a complete sentence. For example, the theme of Fox by Margaret Wilde is that friends can help us through tough times. That goes in a cloud. We want to make sure that it's in a complete sentence, because if it's in a complete sentence on our plan, it will be in a complete sentence in our essay. From the cloud, remember, we're going to have 3 main ideas. Now, I passed out to you a brand new checklist. This is a checklist for writing a theme essay, and I want to make sure that you look down. They all look very similar, but you want to look at your checklist and make sure it says checklist for literary essay theme, because it's going to be different than the character essay that we just wrote. Now, when we're forming our main idea sentences, we want to focus on how the theme was developed. So if you look at the example down here, the sentence frame that you could use. You can see, you could put something like Margaret Wilde developed the theme through the conflict. If that's something that you want to choose. Remember, you have a whole bunch of things that you can choose. And because that's a main idea sentence, it goes in a box. Now, I'm only going to fill out the first box because this is a frame that you can use in your own essay, but I don't want to write 3 main idea sentences and have you copy them, because you really need to do this thinking on your own. So you can go back and you can take a look at all the choices you have. You can go back and reread your copy of the text that you have in your binder. And you're going to basically choose 3 of these options. The ones, obviously, that stand out to you and are very clear for you to see. And then you're going to finish your plan. 3 main ideas. Details that align to that main idea and support it. So for the time remaining today, that's what I need you to work on. I need you to work on your plan for this essay. I will leave this up, and then Octavian, once you have a chance to copy this, I'll move it so you can copy the top part, okay? All right, so go ahead and keep working on your plan. Write your main idea sentences, and then go back in and mine for those details that are going to support your main idea.